Hey everybody, it's Mr. Wagstaff. Cool stuff to talk about today. So today, we're going to talk about terrorism in the modern world. Lots of stuff to unpack today. Let's go ahead and get started. So today, we're going to start talking about terrorism. So today and the next lesson is going to be on terrorism in the modern world and some of the different ways terrorism displays itself in the modern society. Now, I should start out here by clarifying that terrorism isn't new. The KKK and lynchings in America after the Civil War absolutely is terrorism. Terrorist activities have existed for a long time. However, as is a lot of things that we deal with in modern society, the growth of population and the new technology that has come out has changed the way in which terrorists operate. Sometimes in a much more deadly fashion, sometimes in a non-lethal way, as we'll talk about here in a second. But what is important to understand is that the goals of terrorists is to achieve political, religious, or ideological objectives. So, terrorist idea is to terrorize people, to put people in fear. Which is usually a small group of people, feel very strongly in their viewpoint and are willing to attack innocent people to get their point across, hoping to enact change or prevent change from happening. Terrorists, because they're a smaller group, they don't have the use of a government or any large-scale military at their disposal. Typically, there are some larger terrorist groups which get treated a little differently, and sometimes there's just individual terrorists who feel so strongly about what they believe in, they're willing to do just unspeakable, heinous crimes against humanity in hopes that benefits their cause. So, terrorism in the modern society, you may already be thinking about the most well-known terrorist attack of all time in modern society, which is the September 11th attacks on New York City when terrorists attacked the Twin Towers. We're going to talk specifically about Al-Qaeda and the larger scale terrorist groups in the next lesson, and more specifically how they're organized and how terrorist groups form kind of individually in different regions of the world. Today, we kind of want to do an overview of what terrorism is. So, this is absolutely terrorism. This is the quintessential, you think terrorism, this is what pops up into people's minds as the deadliest terrorist attack in the history of the world. I'm recording this in 2022. Hopefully, even if you're watching this in 3022, that is still an accurate assessment. I can't predict the future. But hopefully we don't ever have one worse than that. But human beings can do grotesque things to each other. The big difference here with terrorism, violent terrorism, is that they're not attacking military groups. This is not a small military group attacking other military. They're attacking innocent civilians, non-combatants, people that don't know they're being attacked, people who didn't sign up to be attacked, and they're doing it for ideological reasons. So this, your classic version of terrorism, and from 2013, there were tons of terrorist attacks around the world. As the population increases, it gives the terrorists more opportunities to attack in different locations. The circles here, the biggest circle there on America, that the size of the circle indicates how big the terrorist attack was. There's actually not as many terrorist attacks in the United States as there are in other places around the world. Because not only does America deal with terrorism, a lot of countries deal with terrorist attacks inside their own country. And poverty, you will notice that poverty-stricken areas are known to have more terrorist attacks, and typically the terrorists come from more poverty-stricken areas, and we'll talk about some of that here today as well. But I want to talk about a whole new breed of terrorism that's coming out, and it is cyberterrorism. This is a random picture of like a sketchy guy at a computer. Cyber terrorism has become much more common in the age of the internet. Because information is stored almost exclusively on computers, information people desperately need on a daily basis, terrorist groups have realized that if you hijack that information, you can do massive disruptions to society. So the way they do this is something called ransomware, which is the most common form of this. Basically, terrorists, who obviously are pretty good at computers, will hack into weakly defended computers, and they basically encrypt a whole bunch of stuff, and they lock down all your information like a hospital. They can go to a hospital and basically shut down the entire hospital's information system, so where the hospitals have no access to the patient's charts, to the patient's medical history, what medicines they need. Like people that are in life and death situations, they don't know how much medicine they're given them because it's on a computer that's now been locked down. And then they'll say, give me money or this or that, and that I, meaning the terrorist, will provide the hospital with a code to unlock this. All right. Or if you don't do it, it'll just delete after, all your information will just be gone forever in 24 hours. This is becoming more and more common. And what's crazy is you would think, like, oh, they'll never pay them. A lot of times, these private companies will pay. And it's not a little bit of money. This is an example saying, hey, pay $2 million right now, or we're going to double it to $4 million. And then if you don't do it, we're going to delete everything. But once you do, we're going to give you a code and you can get all your information back. All right. So this is interesting. Usually hackers go with things like hospitals that are small confined. It's not going to get a national government involved because they're private industries. A situation happened in 2021, which is crazy. So in 2021, in the southeast of the United States, there's a company, all right, called Colonial, and they have a Colonial Pipeline. Now, they don't pump out oil. That's not what they do. It's an oil company. But basically, they buy the oil from the Middle East, OPEC, however everybody else gets it. And what they do is they store all their oil in big vats, and then they pump it out down these pipelines that stretch all the way up and down the East Coast, so that places that need gasoline go to these little red dots on the map, pick up the gasoline to put them in the tankers to go distribute them to the different gas stations all along the South. All right. So there's oil inside these pipelines up and down the pipeline. And this is how people get gas if you live in the southeast of the United States. You probably never thought about it. I know I didn't when this happened. Well, the flow of oil inside, like what valve opens, where is it sending it or whatever, is all controlled by a computer at their headquarters. So when hackers and cyber terrorists are trying to find people to attack, they're looking for people that have money, like an oil company would, and people who have like their password for their computer is password, like very weakly defended computer system, which Colonial apparently had. So the hackers, whatever the algorithm is, doesn't really know what they're attacking, just that it's weak and this group has money. Apparently, I don't know, it's like a periscope coming out of a submarine over water, like you can't see much, because they hack into the Colonial Pipeline in 2021 and shut it down and demand a bunch of money. And it's the pipeline cyber attack. Man, this got crazy quick, all right? The Colonial Pipeline covers 5,500 miles of pipeline that can no longer... Now, they didn't steal the oil. The oil was still in there. But none of the valves will open. Everything is run by a computer that the hackers now control. And they say, give us this amount of money or we won't open it back up. Well, what happened is the entire southeast of the United States no longer has gas. Whereas even the gas is sitting in the pipes, you can't get it out because everything's run by a computer that the hackers control. People lost their minds. This is an actual picture of a woman filling up a grocery bag with gasoline and then to put it in the back of her car. Because as soon as people found out this happened, basically all the gas that was at the gas pumps is all the gas that the South had. And people went out and panicked like this and did dumb stuff and almost immediately, like filled up their cars and filled up everything they had so that, not surprisingly, when people panic, everybody ran out of gas. The Southeast, and this went on for like over a week, and it was an absolute, it was like all of a sudden, like there was no gas in the Southeast. It's what makes it crazy is the hackers, all right? And I have never seen this before. Their goal is to attack a weak company that has money and get them pay and then dip out and nobody knows about them. And they did not intend to shut down the entire Southeast because they know you get on the radar too much, the United States military gets involved, which is what they did not want. So much so the hackers actually come out and apologize. Like, hey guys, look, yeah, we did this. We're hackers. We're cyber terrorists. Yes, we know that. Just FYI, we're sorry. We didn't mean to shut down your whole country. Please don't come get the United States government involved because this is a private industry, which is the oil company. They don't want the United States government involved because the United States government can be heavy-handed. And they apologize and say, in the future, we're still going to do terrorist, but we're going to do it on a smaller scale. We don't mean to shut down half your country. And I thought it was very interesting. The way this played out is that, Colonial's like, oh, we were able to break their encryption and we got it back up and running. We didn't pay them any money. The United States government was like, yeah, Colonial wouldn't let us get involved, so we don't know anything about these guys because Colonial didn't want us to get involved. And then it comes out that Colonial had just paid them. Which is what makes this so difficult is because when you're rewarded for terrorist activities, they continue. But the question here is, explain how terrorists have adapted new tactics over time and using new technology, and then use specific examples like basically what we just got done talking about with the Colonial Pipeline is a good example. Or, obviously in modern, so the use of airplanes with the Twin Towers, those type of things is the new technology being used to facilitate terrorism. All right. So a lot of the terrorism that, especially that America deals with, originates in the Middle East. Now, we have mentioned this multiple times already here you get in modern society. There's a big reason why the Middle East is the hotbed for terrorism, especially the terrorism that most affects America. Number one, America is very concerned about the Middle East because that's where oil comes from, and OPEC that powers most of America. So the Middle East here, here is a picture of the entire world. The darker the green the area is, the larger the Muslim population. All right, because that plays a huge role here. All right, so as you zoom in here a little bit, all right, here on Europe, Africa, Asia. All right, we're getting a little closer to Israel is what we're going to talk about. So let's zoom in a little bit closer here. All right, and let's talk about Israel. If you notice, everything around here is dark green. It is a Muslim-dominated region, which is the Middle East. So this is Israel. Better colors that you can see. Israel is a Jewish nation surrounded by Muslim nations. The reason Israel exists is because America went and forcefully allowed that to take place after World War II, after the Holocaust. The reason Israel is such a touchy subject, modern day, and probably always will be, is because Israel is the holy land for multiple religions. Judaism, Jewish people, Christianity, and Muslims. Israel is the Holy Land. Muslims call it Palestine. Because all three religions came from the story of Abraham, and Abraham in the story of the Bible was gifted this land by God, and therefore all his descendants are the rightful heirs to this land. But there is an argument over who his rightful descendants are. Is it Jewish and Christian, or is it Muslims? Regardless, it's a belief system. neither side is willing to back down from their belief systems because it is their entire religion and culture. So both sides are willing to fight viciously over this land that they feel the other side is trying to unfairly steal from them, that is their God-given right. Because of that, tons of terrorism takes place in the region. In Israel alone, this is the amount of deaths that happened by year from 1948 up to, and this graph goes up to 2014, tons of attention because Israel was called Palestine, which was controlled by the Muslims. Then America and the Allies come in 1948 after World War II and basically say, nope, this is now a Jewish state. Vicious fighting takes place between the country that is now called Israel and the people that were there, Muslims, that were called Palestinians, which because the country is just all of a sudden not called Palestine anymore. And with the fighting between the two, tensions rise, and you see just terrorist attacks consistently happen almost every single year from 1948 up to present day. So there's a lot of tensions in that specific region caused by Israel's creation. So the question here is, how did the issues between Israel and Palestine lead to an increase in terrorism? So we have talked about in other units how Egypt and Syria would declare war, like not terrorism, to actually declare war on Israel. The problem is no army in the Middle East can beat Israel in a war. Even though Israel is a tiny country, they have the full backing of the United States and the United States military. So they always have the cutting edge technology in Israel. So there's really no way for a invading country to defeat Israel militarily. So what happens is the smaller groups carry out terrorist attacks inside Israel, trying to, I assume, scare the Israelites into leaving Israel and allowing Israel to return to be Palestine. But up to present day, it is a hotbed of tension and terrorism and just horrific situations on both sides. So the question is, how did the issues between Israel and Palestine lead to an increase in terrorism? So pause me, answer that completely, and we'll move on. All right. So why do terrorists do what they do? Well, there's a handful of reasons why terrorists carry out these horrific acts. One of which is nationalism. The belief that they want their country to be left alone, or they want their own independence from another country. This is most prevalent in Northern Ireland, and even though tensions have gotten better over time there, Ireland very upset with being controlled by Britain for quite a while, and there were terrorist organizations in Northern Ireland that would carry out just absolutely horrific terrorist atrocities in order to try to fight to be free, their own independent country. So nationalist ideology is one of the things that can cause these terrorist groups to form. Another is religion. We see a lot of this in the Middle East. Religious war for Islam is called jihad. Now, I need to very much clear, because when we talk a lot about the Middle East, we're going to talk a lot about that the terrorist groups in the Middle East are Muslim. I do not want to give out the impression that Muslims are terrorists. That is not the case. Terrorists are a itty bitty little speck of human existence. In the Middle East, that small speck happens to all be Muslims. Doesn't mean Muslims, which is like the entire surrounding regions, are all terrorists. And so just as, and I always like to make this comparison, you can't say all Muslims are terrorists because the KKK, the Ku Klux Klan, that is a Christian organization. You have to be a Protestant white male to be in the KKK, the terrorist hate group that lynched and murdered black people. This is a terrorist group. I can't justify why they do hateful stuff, just being hateful and racist. The KKK is a Christian organization. You wouldn't say that because everybody that's in the KKK is Christian, so therefore everybody that is Christian is in the KKK. That wouldn't make any sense. So even though the Muslim terrorist groups are Muslim, that is not fair to say that all Muslims are terrorists. I need to very clearly spell that out here when we talk about jihad and Muslim terrorist groups. That does not speak for the general population anywhere on earth. But Hamas is they are labeled a terrorist group by the United States. Hamas is the terrorist group in Palestine that carries out non-military attacks on civilian populations in Israel, trying to get the Israelites to leave. They're just fighting against what they feel like is the stealing of their land that was given to them religiously. So another one deals with poverty. These countries that grow these terrorist groups are very poor countries. People don't necessarily say, I'm joining a terrorist group because I want to go make money. That's not it. But there's a correlation of poverty and feeling beat down and tread on by the rest of society and joining a group like this. I tried to find a clear graph of in America, people joining gangs and poverty and the rate of poverty and increased use of gang activity in poverty-stricken areas of people desperately trying to find something to hang on to and a group to believe in. You can make a comparison there with these groups that are being created that thrive in poverty-stricken areas. So inequality is a big reason that they grow, but it's more that these groups are focused on the ideology of what you can change in your life, whereas poverty is very hard to overcome if you're in a region of poverty. Another very important part of the skyrocket of terrorism is as globalization happens and different cultures are forced to merge together to interact with each other, there's a lot of people who don't like new ideas. They don't like change. And that is also a catalyst for the increase in global tensions. Is so many things are changing. People want to fight back against these changes. And so globalization is a motivating factor in a lot of terrorist groups. Doesn't mean globalization is necessarily wrong. It's just saying there are people who are willing to fight literally to the death in vicious, grotesque, inhumane ways in order to prevent the encroachment of other cultures onto their own culture. So the question here is, why do terrorists do what they do? And I gave you a whole bunch of information there, so pause me, answer that completely from stuff that we just talked about there, and then we'll move on. So pause me, answer that, we'll move on. So, terrorists want to shut down your society. This is a picture of George W. Bush. And he came out, let me give you some backstory. He is the president of the United States when the 9/11 attacks happened in 2001. George Bush, very soon after the attacks, came out and gave a speech to the world, to the United States and the world, in which he says, when the terrorists struck, they wanted to create an atmosphere of fear. And one of the greatest goals of this nation's war is to restore public confidence in the airline industry. It's to tell the traveling public, get on board, do your business around the country, fly and enjoy America's great destination spots, get down to Disney World in Florida, take your families and enjoy life the way we want it to be enjoyed. He's basically saying that terrorists want to disrupt your life. They want, from the other side of the world, they want to change your life. Don't let them. Terrorists want you to live in fear. They want you to make bad decisions in fear. They want you to change your life out of fear. As soon as you live your life in fear, you let the terrorists win. Don't live in fear. Don't. If you live in fear, it emboldens the terrorists to do it again. If you do not live in fear and you do not let terrorist attacks change your day-to-day life, they'll stop because they realize it's an ineffective way of trying to enact change. So the question here is, why did the United States president encourage Americans to continue their normal daily life after one of the worst terrorist attacks in history? So pause me, if you need to, answer that completely. And that's what I got for you guys today. I will see y'all tomorrow.